The dawn stretched its fingers across the English Channel, brushing silver light over gentle waves, the water murmuring quietly, carrying secrets from one shore to another. Across the sea, London still slept, unaware of the instruments of destruction already in motion, the shadows of a weapon forged for vengeance creeping toward the city. It had all begun just weeks earlier, a moment now etched into the minds of those who had witnessed the first V-1 strike, June 13, 1944, a week after D-Day, when the tide of war had already begun to shift on the European continent. In the pale gray of early morning, at 4:25 a.m., the first V-1 fell upon Grove Road in Bow. The impact tore apart stone and timber alike. A railway bridge collapsed, homes were reduced to rubble, and life fractured in an instant. 6 people were killed, 30 injured, and 200 made homeless. The V-1 was more than an aircraft. It was a technological promise, a child of German ingenuity and ambition. Powered by the Argus AS-109-014 pulse jet engine, it carried 850 kilograms of high explosive at 640 kilometers per hour. It moved with precision, unpiloted, unmanned, yet it was designed with purpose to bring Britain to its knees. Major Walter Dornberger had calculated that even with a modest success rate, the V-1 would deliver more explosive force than the entire Blitz of 1940-41. And for Germany, each missile represented a fraction of the cost of a bomber mission, without risking the life of a pilot. From the vantage point of the German research centers at Peenemünde, confidence ran high. Rocket technology had been mastered. Jet aircraft had been brought to operational levels. Now the cruise missile, its pulse jet thrum, a new language of war, was the culmination of years of effort. Dr. Robert Lasser, architect of the V-1's control system, had studied the mathematical limits of interception. Allied anti-aircraft fire, he believed, was unlikely to achieve more than a fraction of hits. The speed, the small profile, the altitude variability of the missile, all calculations suggested near invincibility. Yet the unfolding reality defied expectations. Reports filtered back, unsettling and persistent, whispering doubts that could not be ignored. The V-1s, weapons of terror, were being stopped. They were falling from the sky in numbers that no calculation had predicted. Observers along the coast noted with growing unease that missiles flying straight and unerring toward their target were being enveloped by bursts of anti-aircraft fire. And then, as if touched by some invisible hand, they tumbled from the sky, destroyed not by direct hits, but by explosions that seemed to anticipate their presence. For Max Vogtl and his officers, the pattern was both baffling and alarming. They understood the mechanics of war, the limitations of artillery, the delicate timing required to intercept a high-speed target. Conventional shells, equipped with timed fuses, demanded precise prediction and perfect execution. Even a small miscalculation, a single second's error, rendered them ineffective. And yet, here, before their eyes, the impossible was happening. The V-1 was a marvel, yes, but the destruction wrought upon it by unseen measures was another marvel entirely. German engineers observing the coastal gunbelt realized that the numbers made no sense. 17% destroyed in June could be explained. 74% by late August was suspicious. 82% in a single extraordinary day was beyond comprehension. Every missile that fell represented a failure of expectations, a quiet rebellion of physics against human design. Outside, the world remained tranquil. Birds flitted across the misty fields. The wind whispered through the hedgerows. Morning light shimmered across puddles in the roads, reflecting sky and shadow in equal measure. Yet above this calm, in the quiet fury of calculation and observation, history was shifting. The V-1, a weapon designed for domination, was being undone not by courage or strategy, but by something quieter, invisible, and precise. The contrast between ambition and reality was stark. Germany had poured labor, intellect, and resources into this vengeance weapon, investing in a project that combined engineering genius with cold calculation. Yet the forces arrayed against it, unseen, methodical, and relentless, were beginning to prove the limits of even the most carefully honed human creation. Every missile destroyed carried with it a story of foresight, of engineering ingenuity, and the quiet triumph of unseen hands shaping the course of war. As the day unfolded, London slept, the pulse of the city unaware, cushioned by the invisible shield that technology had provided. And across the Channel, the German officers recorded, recalculated, and debated, their minds tracing the impossible arcs of destroyed missiles, seeking explanations that remained stubbornly out of reach. The V-1, once the emblem of vengeance and terror, became a testament not just to human ambition, but also to the unpredictability of innovation. For Max Vogtel and his men, the day stretched long, filled with reports and maps, calculations and doubts. And in the quiet of the observation post, history moved in subtle, inexorable rhythms, shaping the future in ways invisible to those who believed they understood the rules of the world. The morning waned, the sun climbing higher, soft shadows receding, and the V-1s continued their journey. Some reached the Channel, never to see London. Others tumbled, caught by explosions that seemed to anticipate their arrival, removed from the sky by forces German science could not yet comprehend. And in that unfolding, a lesson whispered through the quiet mists of August, that even the most formidable weapons can meet an invisible counterforce, a subtle and precise mechanism that bends fate without blood, without noise, without warning. In the stillness, one could almost hear the hum of the pulse jet, the whisper of the wind, the quiet calculation of unseen technology, all converging in a symphony that neither side fully understood. And as the day lengthened, as the shadows stretched and light softened, the world moved forward, guided not only by human will, but by ingenuity hidden in the silence, working to shape history with invisible precision.
The secret of proximity. As twilight descended over the English coast, the horizon blurred into soft shades of purple and gray. The wind whispered across the dunes, carrying the salt and damp earth in gentle currents. Beneath this calm, a quiet revolution of technology unfolded, invisible to the eyes of the world, but decisive in shaping the fate of a city and a nation. The proximity fuse, or VT fuse, as the Allies had coded it, was a marvel both simple and profound. Encased in steel, no larger than a human hand, it held within it the power to defy physics as the Germans knew them. Tiny radio transmitters pulsed silently, endlessly, calculating distance, velocity, and trajectory. When a V-1 missile entered the lethal zone, the fuse sensed its approach, triggered a precise detonation, and tore the flying bomb apart with fragments designed to ensure maximum destruction of its target, or, in this case, prevention of destruction altogether. In factories across America, unseen by the soldiers and civilians who relied on their work, an army of engineers, assemblers, and women working 12-hour shifts poured life into the devices. Vacuum tubes, originally designed for hearing aids, were ruggedized to withstand 20,000 times the force of gravity, spinning at thousands of revolutions per minute, enduring temperature extremes and shock that would shatter ordinary electronics. Batteries slept quietly, inert for years, waiting for the instant they would awaken. Circuits hummed in anticipation, ready to execute commands faster than human thought. The scale of production was staggering. Tens of thousands of fuses rolled off assembly lines each day, mass-produced with meticulous precision. Factories hummed like enormous insects, each worker a vital cog in a system invisible to the outside world, yet essential to the salvation of millions. Sylvania Electric alone produced 400,000 miniature tubes daily, the backbone of each self-thinking shell. Crosley Corporation contributed almost 500,000 completed fuses, almost a quarter of the total production. And still, secrecy was absolute. The workers knew only fragments of their labor, unaware that the devices they built would soon save London from an unprecedented assault. At the same time, across the English Channel, gun crews prepared for another day. Radar arrays scanned the skies, their screens glowing softly in the dim morning light. Algorithms calculated, arcs were traced, and solutions transmitted to the guns. Shells, each containing the silent intelligence of hundreds of tiny components, were loaded with deliberate care. No longer did crews rely on hope, luck, or timing alone. Now they wielded certainty, a technology that made near misses lethal and transformed the act of firing into a near-perfect science. In the early hours of the day, the V-1s launched once more. Their engines whined, a mechanical sound almost mournful in its regularity. Observers watched from the cliffs, binoculars pressed to eyes, notebooks in hand. And once again, the missiles met their fate. Flashes of light, arcs of smoke, fragments raining down into the sea. The explosions were no longer random. They were precise, deliberate, orchestrated. Each falling missile was a silent testament to human ingenuity, a silent victory written not in headlines or medals, but in arcs of fire and steel. For the Germans, the results were impossible. Their calculations, perfected over years of engineering and science, suggested interception should be rare, improbable. Yet day after day, the V-1s faltered, tumbled, and disintegrated as they approached the British coast. Panic and confusion swept through Flak Regiment 155W. Emergency meetings convened. Sabotage was suspected. Nothing could explain the anomaly. Test launches over German territory confirmed normal performance. Only when confronted by the combined force of radar, gun, and fuse did the destruction occur, a combination beyond their comprehension. Secrecy remained paramount. The Allies safeguarded every unexploded shell, every component, every whisper of the technology. Naval vessels patrolled the channel to prevent German recovery. Ground forces could not use the fuses in artillery until months later, the stakes of secrecy outweighing immediate utility. Yet every day, every V-1 intercepted, every missile prevented from striking London justified this invisible constraint. The lives saved were innumerable, the destruction averted monumental. Even amidst the horrors of war, the smoke, the rubble, the cries of civilians, the presence of this hidden technology brought a kind of quiet poetry to the battlefield. The proximity fuse was not just a weapon, it was a promise of protection, a silent guardian, a testament to the human capacity for ingenuity, coordination, and precision. It was the embodiment of foresight, the quiet hum of progress converting fear into security, chaos into order. The Germans could see the effects, but not the cause. They observed the impossible interception, noted the rising destruction rates, attempted countermeasures, night launches, alternative trajectories, larger salvos. All failed. They could not capture the secret because it was everywhere and nowhere, distributed across factories, workers, engineers, and algorithms. It was a collective mind operating through metal and circuitry, a presence that outmatched their individual brilliance. As the sun rose higher, illuminating the cliffs and sands, London slept beneath the shield of invisible hands. Every building spared, every life preserved, every street intact was a quiet testament to the unseen efforts of thousands. The war above the Channel was as much a victory of production and engineering as it was of guns and courage. In those moments, the proximity fuse was more than a fuse. It was a meditation on the power of human collaboration, on the transformative potential of knowledge applied at scale, and on the delicate balance between secrecy and salvation. By evening, the rhythm subsided, the guns rested, the fuses had done their work. Reports filed, numbers logged. History quietly shaped by unseen hands, unseen minds, and the persistent, precise hum of progress. In the calm that followed, one could imagine the hum of factories, the quiet calculations of radar, and the tiny circuits within each fuse, resting, waiting for the next day, ready to repeat the miracle of protection that had saved a city and altered the course of the war.
Factories of salvation. Beneath the rhythmic pulse of industry, across quiet American towns and sprawling cities, a different kind of battlefield existed. Here, there were no explosions, no cries of fear, no smoke rising into the sky. Instead, there were the steady hum of machinery, the measured clatter of assembly lines, and the focused hands of thousands of workers, many of them women, laboring tirelessly to create the instruments of invisible defense. Each factory was a world unto itself. Sylvania Electric's laboratories were alive with fluorescent light and the faint scent of metal and varnish. Rows of miniature vacuum tubes, no larger than a finger, lay in trays, each one a vessel of resilience, engineered to withstand forces that would crush ordinary devices. Every tube underwent rigorous testing, fired in controlled simulations to ensure it could survive 20,000 times the force of gravity, yet awaken instantly at the critical moment. Nearby, Crossley Corporation's production lines moved with synchronized precision. Thousands of fuses passed through the hands of skilled technicians, each performing a single task, unaware of the larger picture, yet integral to the operation of a system that would protect a city across the ocean. Each fuse, carefully calibrated, packed with miniature radios, circuits, and theratron switches, would soon find its place in a shell destined to intercept a V-1 missile hurtling toward London. The work was exhausting, repetitive, yet imbued with quiet significance. Long shifts stretched into nights, and back-breaking hours were endured not merely for wages, but for purpose. There was pride in the invisible. Each component, each circuit, each fuse was a fragment of hope, a shield against destruction, a tangible thread linking effort to salvation. The factories themselves became sanctuaries of concentration and innovation, where ingenuity met precision and collective human effort transcended the limitations of individuals. Secrecy cloaked every operation. Employees understood that what they produced was vital, but the full measure of its importance was veiled in layers of classified instructions. Components were compartmentalized, tasks isolated. No single worker could see the entirety of the mechanism. No single mind could unravel the secret of what they were collectively accomplishing. And yet, this very structure of secrecy ensured the ultimate success of their endeavor. Across the production lines, quality was paramount. Random samples of completed fuses were fired in test guns, subjected to trials that mirrored the extreme conditions of combat. The rejection rate was astonishingly low, less than 2%, a testament to the extraordinary discipline and precision achieved at an industrial scale. In these factories, the ordinary became extraordinary, as everyday labor transformed into a force capable of bending the trajectory of history. By the late summer of 1944, the rhythm of production and preparation reached a peak. The daily output of fuses exceeded the capacity of any one battlefield. 40,000 units rolled off assembly lines each day, their ultimate purpose hidden from all but a select few. These fuses were more than components of artillery. They were the quiet guardians of London, the silent sentinels of the Channel, the unsung heroes of a war waged not only with soldiers and strategy, but with the ingenuity and precision of thousands of hands working in unison. While factories hummed and fuses took shape, the men and women operating the anti-aircraft guns along the English coast trained their focus on the skies. Radar stations scanned, computing arcs, predicting trajectories, feeding solutions to the guns. The synergy of human effort, mechanical precision, and electronic ingenuity created a lethal ballet in the air. Each incoming V-1 missile met its fate not by chance, but by the orchestrated precision of systems perfected through months of unseen labor. For Germany, the phenomenon was inexplicable. Reports of near-impossible interception rates prompted frantic investigations, tactical adjustments, and desperate countermeasures. Yet the secret remained hidden, distributed across thousands of components, factories, and workers. Every unexploded shell was retrieved, every dud accounted for, every stray detail guarded. The city above slept under a silent, unyielding shield, oblivious to the millions of hands and minds that had shaped its safety. The contrast between the two nations was stark. German engineers labored under constraints, producing fewer weapons at great cost, reliant on coercion and forced labor, their efforts fragmented by secrecy and inefficiency. Across the Atlantic, American industry harnessed freedom, collaboration, and innovation, producing fuses in quantities that outstripped enemy missile production, yet with a precision and reliability that seemed almost miraculous. The scale of human coordination and technological mastery created a shield beyond the reach of any conventional attack. And so, as the day drew to a close, factories fell silent, assembly lines paused, and the workers departed, tired, yet quietly victorious. In their hands, in their labor, lay the invisible thread that would shape the skies above London, guiding fragments of steel and circuit to meet destruction with precision. It was a victory of persistence, of collaboration, of ingenuity, unseen but profound, echoing across time in the silent hum of machines and the steady hands of those who labored, not for glory, but for the preservation of life. In the quiet of those evenings, one could almost imagine the invisible pulse of the fuses traveling across the ocean, linking factory to gun, hand to horizon, work to salvation. It was a rhythm of protection, a choreography of precision, a testament to the power of collective human effort transformed into technology.
The battle above the Channel. The first light of dawn stretched across the English Channel, casting silver glimmers on restless waves. A faint wind carried the chill of the sea, mingling with the distant rumble of artillery. Above the coastline, the horizon trembled with the approach of countless V-1 missiles, their pulse jet engines humming a relentless mechanical dirge. To the untrained eye, they were simple machines, but each one carried devastation, a calculated terror designed to crush the spirit of London. Yet the skies were not empty. Silent, invisible, and lethal, the defenses of the Allied forces waited. Coastal gun belts, meticulously arranged and rigorously trained, scanned the air with precise determination. Radar stations, their antennas gleaming against the morning light, traced the approach of each missile. Computers calculated, almost prophetically, the exact moment of interception. It was not chance that guided the shells, but an intricate symphony of human ingenuity, mechanical precision, and electronic foresight. When the first V-1s breached the radar's threshold, the coastal guns responded with near-sentient accuracy. Shells arched gracefully through the air, steel bodies bristling with miniature fuses, their proximity triggers primed and waiting. And then, with a silent intelligence built into circuits and vacuum tubes, the shells sensed the presence of their targets. They detonated not on contact, but when close enough to disrupt, to tear, to shatter. Fragments of metal erupted around the missiles, ripping into hulls, sending pulse jets spinning, wings fracturing, bodies tumbling in arcs of fire. Observers along the cliffs, binoculars in hand, watched in a strange blend of horror and awe. Missiles, relentless in their purpose, suddenly became fragile. Explosions ignited in mid-air, far from the guns' barrels, yet devastatingly effective. V-1s fell from the sky like leaves in a storm, fragments scattering over water, some sinking silently into the channel. Each destruction was precise, unerring, almost impossible to believe. 82% of the approaching missiles on the peak day in late August vanished before reaching the city. For the gunners themselves, the work was calm, rhythmic, almost hypnotic. Each calculation, each adjustment, each fired shell was a thread woven into the larger tapestry of defense. The proximity fuses, tiny electronic mines within each shell, allowed near misses to become kills, converting the potential for failure into certainty. The V-1s, designed to bring terror, instead became instruments that revealed the quiet genius of science applied at scale. Above the channel, the dance of destruction was mesmerizing. Missiles, once symbols of unstoppable terror, now traced fiery arcs before crumpling to the sea. The air smelled faintly of ozone, burnt metal, and gunpowder. The soundscape was a subtle symphony, the mechanical pulse of engines, the whoosh of shells cutting through air, and the soft, explosive pops of fragments igniting around their targets. It was not chaotic. It was a choreography, guided by unseen hands and minds, a ballet of defense performed with a precision that German scientists could scarcely imagine. Yet for those on the German side, the reality was perplexing. Reports of unprecedented losses, misfires that shouldn't have happened, and technology defying calculation reached the desks of commanders. They studied trajectories, inspected engines, debated angles, but found no flaw. They could not comprehend the invisible network of radar, fuses, and artillery that had turned their greatest weapon into debris. Each V-1 that fell was a testament not to error, but to an intelligence beyond their grasp. A combination of industrial might, technological innovation, and human dedication. In London, civilians were unaware of the invisible shield that cradled their city. Daily life continued. Markets opened, children played, smoke rose from chimneys, and the Thames reflected morning sunlight. And yet above them, the skies were filled with peril that never reached their streets. Each intercepted V-1 was a life preserved, a home spared, a family kept intact. It was protection born of science, of human labor, and of collaborations spanning oceans. By the end of August, the pattern was undeniable. Coastal defenses had achieved what German engineers thought impossible. Conventional artillery calculations failed to account for the new variable. The technology transformed probability into certainty. A weapon that should have terrorized a city instead became a spectacle of precision, an invisible shield guided by logic, computation, and countless hands working together in factories and gun emplacements. And so, as twilight fell across the channel, the battle concluded for the day. The V-1s that survived returned to the depths or shattered against the cliffs, while the gunners packed up, the radar stations hummed quietly, and the factories across the Atlantic prepared for another day. The war was fought not only on the fields, but in airspace invisible to most, in the careful timing of explosions, in the rhythm of mass-produced electronics. It was a victory quiet, hidden, and yet monumental, an invisible force that changed the course of history with each small, precise detonation. Factories of victory. Far from the battlefields and the thunder of artillery, a different kind of war unfolded in the quiet hum of factories. Steel girders, conveyor belts, and the rhythmic clatter of machines replaced explosions and gunfire, yet the stakes were no less monumental. In these sprawling American plants, thousands of hands moved with precision and purpose, assembling devices whose very invisibility made them the most potent of weapons. They were the heartbeat of victory, the unseen guardians of London's streets and homes. Rows of women and men labored under bright, clinical lights, soldering circuits, reinforcing miniature tubes, inserting dormant batteries into shells with unerring care. The work was monotonous, yet vital, each motion part of a vast choreography that no single worker could fully comprehend. They did not know that these small, intricate components would travel across the Atlantic, be loaded into guns along the British coastline, and, in the quiet moments before dawn, protect millions from destruction. Their labor was a meditation in motion, disciplined, deliberate, and humbling. At the Sylvania Electric Plant, a symphony of industrial dedication played out. Thousands of women worked 12-hour shifts, handling components that would later survive unimaginable forces. 20,000 Gs of acceleration, temperatures both searing and frigid, rapid rotations that would crush anything unprepared. They were assembling the tiny brains of anti-aircraft shells, each capable of sensing, calculating, and detonating independently, each a sentinel against a weapon of terror. The magnitude of this work was invisible to the naked eye, yet it echoed across the skies of Europe, unseen, unstoppable. Meanwhile, Crossley Corporation converted expertise in radios and household appliances into instruments of war. Entire divisions dedicated themselves to mass-producing components once thought delicate and fragile. Miniaturized vacuum tubes, batteries, and switches were tested rigorously, fired in experimental guns, discarded if found imperfect. Quality control was merciless, precise, yet never indulgent. The aim was perfection in scale. Each shell leaving the factory was more than a device. It was a promise that a V-1 missile with its explosive payload would meet an early, invisible end before it could scar the city below. Production numbers became staggering. By late August 1944, 40,000 fuses were being manufactured daily, each costing a fraction of what the Germans had spent on their elaborate missiles. The industrial efficiency contrasted sharply with German methods, where weapons were handcrafted, labor-intensive, and dependent on forced laborers working in conditions of unimaginable suffering. Here, democracy and industry converged, channeling ingenuity and manpower into a single disciplined purpose. Factories hummed like a heartbeat, steady and rhythmic, as if each machine understood the urgency of its task. The synchronization extended beyond the walls of factories. Logistics ensured that these fuses reached the south coast of England precisely when needed. Artillery crews, unaware of the exact mechanisms that gave their shells such lethal precision, loaded them into guns and waited. Radar operators monitored skies with disciplined focus, feeding trajectories into gunners with calm authority. Each action was part of an orchestration that blended human skill with technological brilliance, creating a lethal yet elegant ballet of defense. And then the V-1s came. From across the channel, the flying bombs hummed through dawn skies, their pulse jet engines beating like dark wings. Gunners remained calm, their eyes fixed, their hands steady. Radar locked, solutions calculated, shells loaded and fired. The fuses, sensing proximity, detonated at exactly the right moment. The V-1s shuddered mid-air, fragments scattered, the threat neutralized. Before reaching homes, before scattering death below, each explosion was silent,
in the sense of personal triumph, yet deafening in its cumulative effect, an invisible chorus of protection enveloping the city. The industrial and human effort converged to achieve what German science called impossible. Missiles that should have wreaked havoc fell instead in controlled destruction, over sea and empty fields, never touching the streets of London. Each intercepted missile was a testament to meticulous preparation, the quiet genius of industrial scale, and the tireless, almost meditative commitment of thousands who would never see the results of their labor firsthand. This invisible victory reshaped the narrative of modern warfare. It was no longer the supremacy of individual weapons or of singular genius that determined outcomes. Rather, it was the orchestration of systems, factories, logistics, radar, artillery, and human labor, woven into a fabric of precision that could accomplish the extraordinary. Here, in the quiet factories of America, victory was forged not by the roar of guns, but by the steady rhythm of hands, machines, and circuits working in perfect harmony. By September 1944, the proof was undeniable. Of over 9,500 V-1s launched, only a fraction reached London. Thousands of lives had been saved, and the terror of the German program was blunted by devices few could see and fewer still could comprehend. And yet, the workers continued, day after day, in silent focus. They labored not for recognition, not for glory, but for the unseen defense of those they would never meet. Their devotion, repeated in thousands of small motions, became one of the most potent weapons of the war, a triumph of industrial democracy over tyranny's crafted brilliance. As night fell over the factories, the machines slowed, the lights dimmed, and the workers left their posts. Outside, the quiet of the English Channel and the English coastline belied the intensity of the struggle that had just occurred. The fuses, the shells, the guns, they had all performed as designed. Victory, quiet and invisible, had been achieved through coordination, ingenuity, and discipline. And London slept, protected not by the courage of a single hero, but by the collective rhythm of thousands of hands, the heartbeat of factories working in unison to rewrite the very nature of warfare.
The fall of the V-1. As dawn stretched across the English coastline, a delicate hush settled over the gun belts, broken only by the soft hum of radar instruments and the occasional report from artillery crews. The V-1s, Hitler's vengeance missiles, began their grim journey across the Channel, their pulse-jet engines slicing through the early mist like mechanical wings of death. Yet what awaited them was not chaos and destruction, but an invisible, orchestrated resistance that German engineers could scarcely imagine. Each flying bomb entered the kill zone like a silent predator stepping into a trap. It moved with deceptive calm, a steady course toward London, carrying within it the promise of terror. But the rhythm of war had shifted. The anti-aircraft defenses, guided by radar, computers, and the unerring precision of proximity fuses, turned near misses into victories, creating explosions that rippled through the sky like controlled thunderstorms. Shells detonated around the missiles with uncanny accuracy, as if guided by a sentient intelligence. And the V-1, so meticulously engineered for destruction, faltered, shattered mid-air, its payload reduced to fragments scattered over empty fields or the gray waters of the Channel. Observers on the coast would later describe the phenomenon with a mixture of awe and disbelief. Missiles tumbled helplessly, disrupted by detonations that never required direct hits. German gunners watching from afar could only shake their heads at the inexplicable failure of their weapons. Entire campaigns, calculated to bring London to its knees, were undone not by valor or strategy, but by a subtle symphony of technology, industry, and human ingenuity.
The proximity fuse had turned every artillery gun into a force multiplier. Each shell a tiny guardian, each explosion a sentence against tyranny's designs. By late August 1944, the effects were unmistakable. On certain days, up to 82% of incoming V-1s were destroyed before reaching the city. The statistics themselves seemed like a trick of physics, impossible to reconcile with conventional ballistic calculations. And yet, each missile that fell harmlessly into the channel or onto empty farmland represented a story of meticulous planning, industrial coordination, and disciplined execution. The sky became a theater of invisible battles, where the clatter of guns was orchestrated, not chaotic, and where precision outmatched speed, and cunning outmatched brute force. The German forces, witnessing this phenomenon, could not comprehend its nature. They experimented with night launches, varied altitudes, larger salvos, even launching during adverse weather conditions. Nothing reduced the effectiveness of the coastal defenses. Each attempt was met with the same quiet, devastating response. V-1s destroyed with an elegance that betrayed the scale of the effort behind it. German engineers had assumed that sheer ingenuity and careful engineering would always prevail. Instead, they encountered a form of invisible mastery, a convergence of human skill and industrial scale that defied expectation. Inside the city, Londoners slept through many of these attacks, shielded by devices they could not see, and by workers whose names would never be known. The explosions of intercepted missiles were not reported in the same way as bombings. They were recorded in logs, analyzed in reports, and yet they formed an invisible protective ring around the capital. The city itself became a quiet witness to the triumph of systematic ingenuity, where lives were preserved not by chance, but by a carefully orchestrated network of men, women, factories, and machines working in unison. The fall of the V-1 was more than a tactical victory. It was a profound transformation in the understanding of modern warfare. Weapons no longer guaranteed success through their design alone. The decisive factor had shifted to the capacity to integrate intelligence, technology, production, and human labor into a coherent, unstoppable system. Each missile that failed to reach its target was a lesson in the power of collective action, in the efficiency of industrial democracy, and in the quiet, unseen genius of mass production. By the end of the V-1 campaign, German attempts at adaptation were futile. They had created the first operational cruise missile, yet it was neutralized by a weapon that was simultaneously simpler and infinitely more sophisticated. A small, self-sensing fuse born from collaboration between scientists, engineers, and factory workers. They had reached the pinnacle of their technological imagination, and yet it was insufficient. They had underestimated the capability of an entire industrial system working with precision, and that miscalculation saved tens of thousands of lives. As the sun sank low over the channel, the echoes of the destroyed V-1s faded into the distance. Each falling missile, shredded mid-air, became a quiet testament to ingenuity, resilience, and human foresight. The battlefields remained silent, the city undisturbed, and yet history had been quietly, irrevocably altered. Warfare, once a contest of individual bravery and weapon superiority, had evolved into a contest of coordination, intelligence, and collective capacity. And in that evolution, the fall of the V-1 marked a turning point, not just for London, but for the entire understanding of how modern conflicts could be won. The sky above the south coast was never still, yet the rhythm of interception became predictable, almost meditative. Radar hummed, guns fired, shells rose and exploded with precise timing, and London slept, oblivious to the thousand small victories occurring above, protected by the quiet work of those who had never held a gun in battle, but whose labor resonated across every street and home.
In the end, the V-1 fell, not through brute force, but through patience, planning, and the orchestration of unseen forces. It was a victory of systems over singularity, of collective precision over individual cunning. The missiles, once harbingers of terror, became instruments of revelation, showing the world that, in modern war, victory was determined as much in laboratories, factories, and offices as on the front lines. And so, as dusk turned to night, the final echoes of the destroyed V-1s faded into silence, leaving behind a city unscathed, lives preserved, and a new understanding of the nature of warfare, a quiet testament to human ingenuity, invisible yet undeniable, shaping history in ways no single soldier could ever achieve.
Reflections on the Secret War. Night descended slowly over England, draping the cities, fields, and coastlines in deep indigo shadows. The quiet was deceptive. The war was not over, and yet, for London, the greatest threat of the V-1 campaign had passed. Thousands of tiny, invisible victories had secured the city, each one a fleeting spark of ingenuity in the darkened skies. And as the night deepened, it became clear that the war was as much a contest of minds, factories, and meticulous planning as it was a contest of weapons or soldiers. The proximity fuse, the unsung hero of this invisible struggle, remained a secret even to those whose lives it had safeguarded. Its workings were hidden in the small, precise components produced by countless hands across American factories. Tiny vacuum tubes, delicate circuits, and meticulously engineered batteries, all combined to create a mechanism that could sense, calculate, and act faster than any human eye could follow. And yet, for all its sophistication, it was also a simple idea. Let a shell think for itself. Let it respond to the presence of the enemy, and let it act with precision and purpose. For the German engineers, the reality was humbling. They had believed in the supremacy of the V-1, in the brilliance of individual invention, in the power of sheer technological achievement. And yet, the missiles they launched, carrying the weight of years of research, fell victim to something they could neither see nor understand. They searched desperately for answers, variations in altitude, changes in timing, sabotage, but every effort failed. The invisible hand guiding the anti-aircraft defenses remained beyond their grasp, a testament to the unmatchable coordination of production, science, and strategy on the Allied side. In London, life continued with its quiet rhythms. Streets awakened each morning to the sound of trams and footsteps. Children played in parks that could have been battlefields, and workers went about their days, unknowingly protected by technology they did not fully comprehend. The city's survival was a mosaic of countless small acts. Engineers designing circuits, factory workers assembling fuses, radar operators tracking missiles, gunners trusting their instruments. Each action, repeated with precision, became part of a larger, invisible choreography that saved lives, preserved homes, and maintained the pulse of a city under siege. The contrast between the warring nations was stark. Germany relied on the brilliance of individual machines and the exploitation of human labor, often forced, achieving technological marvels in isolated pockets. America, in contrast, leveraged scale, collaboration, and industrial capacity. Millions of workers, many unaware of the full picture, produced reliable technology in mass, demonstrating that the outcome of modern warfare was determined not only on battlefields, but in factories, laboratories, and offices. The V1 campaign revealed the profound truth. The most effective weapon was not always the most complex, nor the most spectacular, but the one that could be produced, deployed, and trusted on a massive scale. And so, the story of the proximity fuse became a meditation on human ingenuity, industrial coordination, and the quiet triumphs that never made headlines. It was a reminder that wars are won not solely by heroism or courage, but by careful design, foresight, and the unseen efforts of those who work without recognition. The missiles that had threatened to devastate London fell instead, destroyed by a combination of science, precision, and the tireless work of thousands whose names were never recorded in history books. As the months passed and the shadow of the V1 receded, the lessons of this secret campaign lingered. Technology had reshaped the battlefield. Industrial democracy had triumphed over forced ingenuity. Systems had outmatched individual brilliance. And in the quiet reflection of post-war analysis, historians, engineers, and participants alike would recognize that the proximity fuse was more than a weapon. It was a symbol of what humanity could achieve when knowledge, labor, and creativity were united towards a common purpose. The night sky, once streaked with the engines of destruction, now held only stars, quiet witnesses to a war that had been fought in secret, at scales both microscopic and monumental. The hum of machines and the flashes of artillery had faded, leaving behind a calm, reflective silence. And in that silence, one could hear the echoes of innovation, determination, and collective effort, the invisible forces that had saved a city and perhaps shaped the course of history itself. In the end, the V1 missiles became relics, remembered not for their destructive power, but for what had overcome them. The proximity fuse, the unsung guardian, remained a quiet triumph of intellect and industry. London survived, lives were spared, and the war, vast and terrible, was subtly transformed by a technology small in scale but monumental in impact. As you drift into sleep, imagine the quiet hum of a factory, the careful hands assembling circuits, the pulse of radar guiding artillery, and the invisible orchestration of events that turned chaos into safety. Let the story of the fall of the V1 remind you that the most profound victories are often those that go unseen, quietly shaping the world in ways that only reflection can reveal. Let your mind rest, guided by the rhythm of history, the calm persistence of ingenuity, and the knowledge that, even in darkness, precision, patience, and intelligence can prevail.